Hi everyone, welcome Future Work Scotland. Great to have you here. Thank you for joining us to an ultimate session of 2024. Well into November. Scary as that. The weather's definitely turned here in Scotland. Then we get our jumpers on. Can even wear my Future Work Scotland t-shirt tonight. But thank you for joining. We've got a great session in store for you this evening. Just our usual formalities. We just ask that you be respectful of one another. That's how simple we like to keep our code of conduct. We will have time for questions at the end. It's a great session we've got for you, and I'm sure Wouter will be happy to take some questions along the way. But if you do have any questions as we go, drop them into the chat, prefix them with a Q if you can, so the team and I can spot them more easily, and amongst all the other contributions or participations we tend to get over the course of the session, and then we'll pick them up towards the end, and we might take some of them as we go if they're relevant to what our speakers covering, and we'll do a usual shout out for the remainder of the events that we've got in the programme for you upcoming. And with that, I'm delighted and thrilled to welcome Wouter to Future Work Scotland for this session. We've got to know each other over the last few years. I've become good friends over the conference scene, and we're gonna hang out in Belgium next week actually at XP Days Benelux, so that'll be great. Wouter's really all about product leadership, technology leadership, and strategy really. So bringing all three together, so that's music to my ears. Alignment between strategy, product management, and software delivery. What more could we want in life? And in this session, he's going to be talking a lot about legacy. So I think that's something that most of us have probably been plagued by at some point. Darrell's holding up Wouter's new book, Escaping Legacy. So I think it's very relevant. Most of us in this landscape, I certainly work in an environment where there is quite a lot of complex legacies. So we have to find ways to make sure that doesn't hinder us or deter product innovation. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Wouter to share his session. Really looking forward to the insights he's going to share. So, Wouter, great to have you here, and welcome to Future Work Scotland.
Thank you, Sath, and thank you all for having me here. And beautiful introduction. I don't have to talk about myself anymore. I will give a little talk. I'll share my screen. Sath was saying, any questions that come up, please just post them. I'll try and find natural places in the during the conversation to engage with them. Let me try and do the sharing thing again. All right. There we go. Yeah, I think that's it. Cool. Yeah, so let's see. I'm going to talking about the legacy and how to get rid of it, or at least how to live with it. Like I said, Seth, thanks for the introduction. That is me. I try to help people with problems when they're dealing with software delivery, with product delivery, and I run into, like all of us, I think, a lot of legacy systems, and as at some point that was enough of that, I actually decided to write a book about it. So someone told me I should really actually sell it, so I actually put a QR code on the slide this time, which is as far as that goes. Let's see. Everyone seems to be running into legacy systems. I think that is so well known that in the Netherlands, for instance, it's kind of a running joke that we can't change our VAT rates because it would take the tax authority so many years to actually update their systems to deal with the change in rates, that a new government would come in and revert the change anyway. So we don't even bother. Of course, I think our current government is like on the edge of falling again, or and they've only been in power for like 4 or 5 months, so maybe that's not a great example anymore. But usually it's like 4 years. Yeah, it's hard to do change, and for me that's the definition of legacy, a system that is really hard to change. Um, Oddly enough, when I started writing the book, I was working with a publisher, and they figured, well, um, no one actually knows about no one really knows that term legacy. So who's going to buy the book? Um, so I did a little research, as you're supposed to be doing, right? A little market research, and asking product managers on LinkedIn and on Reddit to uh, tell me about whether they'd ever run into any issues with legacy systems. And the results were like overwhelmingly, well, not positive, but affirmative, that everyone runs into these sort of situations. Very difficult to release, slow release cycles, takes a long time to test your systems. The amount of bugs is grows to incredible numbers. We've got people saying, "Oh, we need to stop the world uh, and take a year to rewrite the system from scratch, and then everything will be well." Um, the, Between 2/3 and 3/4 of the product managers that I was sending the survey to um, knew all of these. Had to deal with all of those issues on a day-to-day basis. So it's quite a ubiquitous issue, and um, there's other research about legacy, about what why why do we think it's such an issue? Well, it makes everything really costly. Adam Tornhill from Code Scene, you may have read his book, Your Code Base as a Crime Scene, which is a very nice way to look at code and at technical debt. But he published some research. Actually, he links to a few different types of research, and that says like somewhere between like a quarter and 40% of time from developers tends to be spent dealing with legacy, dealing with bugs, being slowed down in creating new things. And those are like huge numbers. But then again, you're here, you're listening to me, you probably already know this from your own experience. So I'll not try to sell legacy anymore to you. One of my big issues with when dealing with legacy is that very often it is seen as a technical problem. In the book, I tell a story that happened to me like 15 years ago, but it still resonates with me. We were working on an e-commerce like web system, and we needed to actually do a partial rewrite of that system. It was impossible to get the performance up to normal levels without doing some significant changes. And when we were discussing that with the product owner in that situation, he said, "Well, cool. I'll go on a vacation for 2 weeks, 2 months, sorry, and I'll see you afterwards." And of course, that was not how we played that situation, and we actually got him closely involved. But it is typical for the way that this seems to work, and it's really weird because at the same time that if I go into a development team, most of the time they'll not be happy with the way that their product people are owning the system, owning the full system, owning the quality of the system. And then oddly enough, if you then go and talk to those product people, they feel like they're being excluded. no, we need to do this refactoring. It's none of your business. Or they just don't know how to get involved. And for me, that was the main driver to write the book, because every time I've done this, the results are so much better if everyone works together and attacks this big problem in the organization uh, in a concerted way. Right? Everyone needs to be involved. Everyone needs to be able to make the decision that they need to be able to make, um, and um, um, and no one needs to like stop the world and wait for. And I've literally had those conversations. I've heard those conversations. It was, sitting actually at lunch at a client, and there were a bunch of infrastructure architects sitting next to me, and they were having this conversation, and we were like, yeah, no, yeah, we're gonna do the Oracle upgrade, and we've already told the business that there will be no new functionality for the next 12 months. I mean, these situations happen a lot. That no one is helped by doing any of that. But it's worse than that. If you look at legacy technical debt as an engineering only problem, you are pretty much guaranteed that you will not be able to fix it. Because if you start building a new system and you're not changing the ways that you're building the system, then you're almost certain to build a new legacy system. And that's for me, that was an important part of it. I kind of like redefined legacy for my book, as in it's not just the attributes of the software system, it's the attributes of the system, including the containing system, the organization building it, that make you unable to deliver at pace. So, but if you want to change the way that you build the systems, you first need to realize what it is that actually causes you to build legacy systems. So, it can be interesting to have a look and see what things play a role in building legacy. Now, the first thing I think that is very important to realize is that no one actually sets out to build a legacy system. You will not hear many people, whether that be developers, managers, or product owners, say, let's spend 3 months and build the lousiest system that we can build so that we get stuck and we cannot release any new features after like 3 or 4 months. Let's do that. That's probably not going to be the case. So if you want to look at that like that, first thing you have to do is you have to assume that there's good intentions. This is the prime directive of retrospectives, but everyone did the best job they could, given what they know, given their ability. That's also part of it, and the situation. Now, if you're of a slightly more cynical frame of mind, and I'm not saying that I am, but well, I am. You can rephrase that in a less positive way. If you're not familiar with that, Hammond's razor is the more cynical version of the prime directive. Never attribute to malice, which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Sometimes stupidity is replaced by incompetence. It is another way of looking at the same thing. But the most important part of this is everyone starts out with good intentions. So that means that when you're in an organization and you're looking at the way that they work, you kind of need to think, why did they do this? Because everything that you will run into is the solution for a problem. And I'll give you a few short examples. One of them is from the agile space, story points. Everyone knows story points. Everyone is really happy with story points. Yeah. So story points were a solution to a problem, right? They were way back in one of the early XP teams. They tried to make sure that the team wouldn't be overloaded, that they wouldn't spend too much time on estimation. So they do some relative estimation, which is quicker and maybe even better. And unfortunately, while they were doing this, it seemed to work out pretty well. And two people that were in the team, Ron Jeffries and Chet Hendrickson, wrote the idea up in their book because it was really good. And as they tell it, by the time that the book got published, they stopped using them already because they started to notice the side effects. And the side effects, well, this was a post I came across on Reddit not too long ago. Is that at some point all of these teams started doing weird stuff with the idea of story points, and going up to the point where there's a meeting and we'll just give it story points, because then at least we won't have a dip in in the number of story points we deliver this sprint, that sort of thing. So anyway, running chat, they apologized for the whole idea and they walked back on it, but I'm still dealing with the fallout. Good intentions, perhaps even a really good idea at the time, but 20 years later, not the best situation. And that sort of thing happens a lot, right? I sometimes use these little sketches of situations to help myself think through different situations. This is another one of those things where I think that everyone runs into at some point. We really need to up the speed of delivery. Someone thinks that because of that, it's a good idea to spend more time or to improve the way that we estimate. The team feels that as more pressure being put on them to actually deliver in the time that they estimate. So the estimates go up now, and then Parkinson's law, hits, and the estimates go up. The time actually used to necessary for development goes up because they just spend the time that's available, which means that delivery slows down and the pressure to speed up delivery goes up, and suddenly we were in a nice vicious cycle, and everything falls over. There's a lot of those sort of situations where we have an idea and we think it's a good idea, and there's all kinds of reasons why that might not work. I'm sorry, I put a lot of these. I put a little too many, I have to admit, of these in the book. I also put too many on the slides, and if I go through every one of them, it'll take ages. So, side effects, good intentions, everything we do makes it more difficult. Can seem like a good idea at the time, but can get us into real trouble, right? We run in the reason people started doing waterfall big project planning is because they thought that would be the solution to problems they had with delivery, with dependencies, with with different elements in their process and in their situation, and these things stuck around, often with all kinds of workarounds on top, so that you no longer recognize what the original idea was. But if we want to change what we're doing, we need to look at very carefully about what the effects are of the way that we're working. And we need to accept that, some of the things that we have been doing did not get us where we wanted to go. And then that means that we need to find out what a different way of getting there is. So how do you do that? Now, I'm just going to give you the short and simple version. And if you know me, then it's very predictable. If you know the agile space, it is also very very predictable. But the best way of dealing with it is not trying to fix the problem in one go, right? We don't try to, like I said, we don't try to throw away the system and spend a year replacing it. But this is very, very often the default. It's the default because it tends to be very hard to change the way that we're working. And we've got this hope that if we start from scratch, suddenly everything will be fine, right? This time we'll do it better. Uh, has anyone have you ever done this what was the name? The ballpoint game. This used to be one of those exercises we did when we were giving training in agile practices, and it was meant to teach people that they actually had to change the way that they do things to improve. And it was a simple game. It just you had these little colored balls, and people had to take the ball from one bag. Everyone had to touch the ball, and then it had to go into another bag, and the ball had to go through the air between people. So there had to be a moment where no one was touching it. It was very, very simple rules. And when you play that game, people throw the ball, and someone catches it, and then throws it to someone else, and they catch it, or they miss it, and it falls, and then you get, then you miss points. Most teams, when you let them go through that after like a couple of rounds, they speed up incredibly, and at some point someone figures out that you can just drop the ball, and everyone puts their hands in there, and it falls into the right place. But I had one particular situation where I was doing that game with a set of only product managers, only project managers, to be very clear. And they stood around the table and they were throwing the balls. And every time we started a new round, they just did the same thing. They didn't change position. They didn't get closer together. They didn't change the way that they were working. And I was saying, well, maybe you should, try something else. Or no. We've practiced now. Everything will be will be much faster this time. This only happened one time, but this one time I actually had to like actively tell them, get away from the table, stand closer together, and and it was, oh yeah, no, we had twice the amount of balls that we could process. But for a lot of people, it's hard to look at the way that they work and change it. I'm sorry, that was a unnecessary sidestep, but it's a really funny story. It is a really funny story. Yeah, there we go. The way that I think we should do this is by looking very carefully at where we are and taking small steps to improve. And like I said, that's difficult. I had one job I was in. I think I worked there for 4 years, and we built the same system 5 times. And I love telling that story because it was the same thing every time, right? You built the new system that is supposed to be the answer to all the problems from the old one, but because it takes some time to build it, the pressure comes up to deliver more functionality, and then by the time you're almost done, someone starts a new project, and the whole cycle starts all over again. Um, it it it's a trap we fall into a lot. So the first rule of how you change a legacy system is you don't throw it away in one go. Um, and you need to look very, very carefully about at what you're doing and how you're working to be able to make this into a successful project. Now, I have in the book, I've made this into a bit of a formula, right? Because I can talk about these things in the abstract, but what I try to do is make it really concrete on how you would actually go through the motions of iteratively, incrementally getting more control of a legacy system and being able to refactor and replace the parts of it that you need to refactor. And I've tried to make that as formulaic as possible, so that we can actually teach by example, because that's I think is usually the best way to go about that. And what I'm trying to put in there, let me, yeah, I wrote a whole book about it, but this is the summary. And so when I'm creating these slides, I'm like, I really need to do something about selling the book, right? Let's see. And then when you're actually like going through and giving the presentation, it's like, I mean, that's not a natural moment to throw a book at people's head. Anyway, what we need to do is we need to get in control of this legacy system. Why is it hard to change? Now, there are all kinds of reasons why it can be hard to change. It can be because it's old technology. It can be because it's the infrastructure is hard to deal with. But in the end, the thing that stops most people from actually making speed on delivering within a legacy system is they either don't know what it does well enough, and they can't do it because of that. They can't do a change. They can't change what they don't know what they're changing, right? And that is very, very tightly coupled to how well a system like that is tested. So the core of what I propose is very carefully go through your system, find the places, find out what it does, find out the places where that functionality is more complex, more more complicated or more sensitive, and go into depth and get those things very, very well documented. Find out exactly what the business rules are and why they're there, so that you can test them and so that you can change them. That's the really short summary of the book. There you go. Now you don't have to buy it. When you're doing that, yeah, like I said, that's not my natural. Sales is not my natural talent. So what I said is you do that. You go in and you find out exactly what it does, but you don't do it all at once. Now, the next slide is a little scary, but it's just meant to give a little view of we're using some fairly familiar and off-the-shelf techniques that are very well known in the land of the agile product owner, but they tend to be fairly well known, and we're using them to instead of for new functionality, we're using them for existing functionality, and we're not doing all of that in one go. We're not going through the whole system to find out everything and create every test that we can think of. No, we're doing that iteratively. We're picking parts of it, diving deep where we need to dive deep, and staying on the surface where it's less important. So that's why there's all the arrows and circles, because if you don't, every time you do anything linear, like writing a book, people think it's a waterfall process, and yeah, so I need to have some circles in there. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if you look at the map, it says the first thing is create a heat map. Now, a heat map is nothing more than a very, very high level look at what your system is doing. So what areas are there in the system and what features do you have in there? That's pretty much the start of what you do. I try to emphasize this in my writing. That can be really, really simple, right? In most places, if you get a product manager and a tester and a developer together, and you put them in front of a whiteboard for half an hour, you will probably have the starting of your heat map. You'll have a functional breakdown of what the system does. Now, this is an example I use in some of my workshops, which is Spotify. You simply start by looking at this from the user's point of view. What does this system do? Well, we've got a home screen, we've got a search screen, we've got a library. The library has playlists, but it also has albums, but it also has podcasts. It's got you've got different things in there. But you simply start going through them and putting them on the board and thinking about all the functionality that you have. Now, that starts out something like this, usually more than just this, right? You'll have a bunch of different features in different areas for your system. It can end up a lot more complicated. Yeah, don't try to dive into the screen and read this because this is from a real client, so they don't want you to be able to read what they did. This is from a live app from a large car manufacturer, and it has like you can see, a bunch of different areas, and it has color coding for each of the features in there, indicating how well they're being tested, how confident we are if we need to do a change there, that we can do that without anything failing catastrophically. Now, this is a thing that you build up. This started out with a flip over and like 25 stickies on it, and that was a good start, right? So you don't have to do a big thing about it to get there. You can start out in like I said, in half an hour with a couple of people who know your application fairly well, and you can have a good starting point for this. At some point, someone got tired of all the stickies, and some of the design people created a nice version of it. But that's a bonus. And it helps me because now I have got a nice picture to put on my slides. So we start out looking at the system from the outside. What does it really do? And then we look at where we are less than comfortable doing a change. Now, you can do real research here, right? You can do static analysis on your code base. You can analyze where your bugs are coming from, in which feature areas they exist, which teams they usually get into. You can do a lot of work here. But the easiest thing to do is to ask a developer, hey, if we need to do a change in this particular feature, how do you feel about that? And you can just look at their faces, or it's again, there's different ways of looking at this, and you can analyze it in a little more detail by looking at what type of functionalities you're talking about, whether it's really important for the application or whether you've seen a lot of bugs there. But usually for the first prioritization, it's going to be really clear that there's a couple of areas that you just don't want to change. If those areas, and we're doing this together with technology and product, right? If those areas happen to coincide with places where you want to do changes in the near future, you might have your priorities clear. I'm just trying to make sure that we keep it simple. So if you find a feature where you want to have some more information about, then we can look at that, and we can look at that particular flow and go into more detail. The tool that I use in the book, and that I'm very fond of, is user story mapping, which means that we take a feature, we look at the flow a user goes through to achieve their goals, whatever goal that is for that feature, the steps that they go through, and we split that out into different stories, different clusters of stories. When we do that for existing functionality, it's a little different than for new functionality, because we're not trying to find out what the best way of building this would be, or what the simplest possible version of it would be. But we are trying to find out what would be the different paths through that flow and the different results that a user can get, and split the flows up in that way. So if we look at an example, this is one of the examples from my book. You can see that there's a at the top there, the user tasks. I hope this is visible on your screens. Yeah, it's the main flow through, in this case, an insurance application. This is the apply for insurance feature, and but there's different variations of it, and I've given those names in big letters, so that's easy to see. Yeah, but there's variations where we have a successful application, we have a declined application, we have different variants of the insurance being requested. So we can look at these splits into, these are the main different ways that this application is being used, and the main ways that you would interact with it. What this does not do is analyze what the rules are for, giving you the insurance or not, right? It just tells you what the flow through that whole system is. So this is still at a very, very high level. What I do usually with teams is I use those slices from the story map, and I put them back onto the heat map, and we look at whether these things are actually being tested at the moment. In many situations, not all of them, but in many situations where we're talking about a legacy product, people have a lot of manual testing still happening, right? That's one of the reasons often why it's hard to release, because the testing cycle can take a long time. And this is actually one way, counterintuitively maybe, where we can optimize by reducing the amount of testing, because very often when we go through these sort of flows, a lot of detailed testing is being done manually. I remember I was doing this process with an e-commerce, no, not an e-commerce, what's the name? A financial startup in London, and they were they had somewhere around the 3,000 manual test scripts that they would go through for the release of their application, both server and client side. And one of the first things we did is we put these flows next to what they were already what they were testing, and looked at where the tests were getting where the tests are spending a lot of time. And I simply took that information to the development teams, and because in that particular setup, those were working very much separately, as is often the case. And I verified which of the cycles in these test flows were already being tested by unit tests. And we could throw away half of the manual test cases just by doing that exercise. I know that sounds a little. These things sometimes sound hard to believe because um, it, it it feels really stupid, but it's what happens when these um, parts of the organization work in isolation, right? So one of the first things I did was simply reduce the test cycle by half without any decrease in quality, simply by looking at what is being tested. Is it necessary to do more than the bare minimum of going through the flow and checking whether everything still hangs together there? And are there other tests already in place that capture some of this? It can be that simple to have a big effect, and it's nice to realize that, because when you start these sort of processes and when you start improving a legacy system, uh, it can feel like it takes a long time to get any benefit out of it. So in this sort of counterintuitive way of looking at it, we have a problem with our testing, we have a problem with our quality. Hey, the first thing we should do is less testing. Is can be a little confrontational, but there are situations where that you can very quickly get to those conclusions. Anyway, so what we have now is somewhat of a uh, view of our functionality and the different variations in which we can encounter. We don't really know any of the detail yet. So um, these sort of flows that you have are very high level, but very low resolution tests. I explicitly try to get away from talking about end-to-end test or unit test or integration test, or because those things have different meaning in every organization that I come to. So I'm just doing it at a very, very high level here. So we've got tests that capture a large part of the flow of the application, but they don't capture a lot of detail. So they are low resolution. Um, let's see. And we have other types of tests, which are low level and high resolution. And those are um, going into exactly the sort of detail that you want to make sure that your sensitive business rules are being followed. So logically, and because I'm a consultant, that needs to be a quadrant. Um, there could also be low resolution, low level tests, and actually in practice, that luckily doesn't happen much. Um, and there can be high resolution, high level tests, which is exactly what I was just talking about when we start testing all the intricacies of the business rules all the way end to end for the system, in which case it becomes very expensive and very difficult to deal with them. Now I have a lot of slides to show that, but I'm going to skip on most of that because that's the wrong audience. So um, let me get back to where we were on the flow of the process map. We had our heat map. We looked at what features we have. We extended it for the parts of the application that we're interested in, and because we did that, we found some parts of that have interesting business rules. Now, for the interesting business rules, we need to find out what exactly the business rules are. If you would look at this from a technical point of view, you would do some sort of characterization test. You would look at what kind of inputs you had into the system. Maybe you would collect those, and if you want to create a new system, you would simply go and throw all of that those same requests to the new system. What you don't know then is why those rules are there. which means that you're still not improving your understanding of the system that you have built and that you're running. So I tend to take a different approach, where I try to surface what the original requirements are, and with product involved, make decisions about whether we still think that should be the case. One of the results you get if you, for instance, replace an existing service with a new one, and you don't know exactly what the rules are, is that you maybe implement the new system and then compare the results between them. And there's always going to be like, at some point when you're at 90%, there's going to be like 5 to 10% of the cases that you simply don't know what to do with. I think it's important, at that point is you usually find out that it's important, that you actually need to define what you think the business rules should be, and check whether that actually works with your system. Because at that point you can look at, we have these types of, for instance, we have these kind of types of customers, we have these kind of products. These are no longer relevant, but they're still in the old system, and we want to make decisions on whether to remove that functionality or not, right? So, so you need the why the functionality is there as much as you need what is there. For that purpose, I tend to use example mapping. It's the example mapping. Madeline came up with that. It's a good and quick way of going into business rules, finding out what the concrete way is of triggering them, and what the expected results are. And the nice thing, of course, with an existing system is that while we're doing that, we can actually test whether the examples we come up with have the result that we expect them to take. So if you're not familiar with that, this is one example that of an example map from the Spotify example. If we create a new playlist, what are the business rules? These are really simple, right? What's the length of a business rule? If you don't give one, what is the automatically generated one? And which different situations can we think of there? If you have the Spotify app, you can try this out as you're going along, and you can simply check whether your assumptions are right. The nice thing about being specific like this is that we both look at what we want to happen. Well, what is the actual rule, and we look at how would that look in a test. So these examples can get as complicated and as detailed as you want. If we go for a more complicated system, like a financial system, these will include all of the rules in which we calculate the financials, make decisions based on the input. So, for instance, for our insurance example, this would include the information about, okay, so if the based on the age of the applicant, based on how long they've had a driver's license, for instance, and the age of the car, it would be able to tell whether the insurance can be given and what the cost of it will be. Right, so we can have a large set of rules that needs to be pulled out in detail. Now, what I'm not going to go into right now is that once you've got those examples, you can actually implement them as usually fairly simple and fast running tests, which is also part of this flow of getting the system under control, which will help you pull more of the manual testing out and put it into automated testing. and it will help you get the confidence exactly at the places where you want it to be, where the places where you want to change them, right? You usually want to change the business rules. That's the place where we expect the most errors. That's the place where we fear the most errors. So we can make it so that those places in the system are easier to deal with. And then we run into, we run into the next iteration, and we go into the next part of the system where we maybe want to do a change in the future, or where there's more sensitive areas, and we go in through this until we are happy enough that we can release the type of changes that we want to do at the pace that we want to do them. And at that point, at least according to my definition, it's no longer a legacy system. We still may have lots of parts of it that we don't like. We may have parts of it that, if we would change them, would take a long time to change. But we've got enough control that when we go into a new area of the system, we know exactly what to do, and we can do the change do the hard change that will make the change easier when we need to. So that's the detailed way of going through this. So I see that there's some questions in the chat. So let's go there and
Yeah, thanks, Wouter. Yeah, no, good stuff. Yeah, there's a few. I think they're maybe all from Tom. I think Tom is having to drop off, but I'll certainly ask the questions. I'm just scrolling back a bit. I think we start. Yeah, so I think yes, I think starting point. So Tom's initial comment was this advice sounds scary. I guess when you're dealing with legacy, it's scary because it's a risk piece, isn't it? I think Tom was looking for, yeah, so maybe some case studies, examples, data. I'm assuming that means costs, quality levels of improved software. So I guess maybe a case study. I don't know whether you have such things.
I don't have published case studies because I don't normally do that, but I have a number of cases where I've gone through an approach like this. It's not always exactly the same. Like I said before, this is the extracted version across 10, 15 years of different clients. So it's not going to be the exact same in different cases. But yeah, a good one of the case studies is actually a full rebuild. One of the cases I worked in where we rebuilt actually two different apps, and Android and iOS apps into one multi-platform app. That was the one where you saw the big heat map from, and a lot of the work we did there was exactly this. So going into what are the flows in the old system. You saw that you saw the heat map there. While we were doing the rebuild, there were also improvements being done in testing in other ways, which on the old system. And for the flows that we wanted to preserve, we would go in, find out what the different flows are, find out what the detailed business logic was. And though it was like I said, it was a mobile app, it was one that connected to the car. So there were interesting complexities there. Just finding out what the real login, and it's just the very first thing we built, the login mechanism and the way of connecting the phone to the car. It took 3 weeks to find out what the actual logic there was. Right, we did our story map. We added, we got the different parts of the functionality. From that, we did example mapping on what we thought the functionality was. We wrote those tests. They failed because it was not what they were. The functionality was not what everyone thought it was. because there was a lot of complexity in this in that particular area of the system, and in that way, it was a very it was very much going through the exact motions of this process. It ended up with an app that was a fraction of the size in Logic, because we actually could find out what which parts of the logic were still relevant. The old app was 10 years old. It had been reworked a number of times based on different backends that had been relevant at the time, because they had similar issues with that. Just by going through the motions of this on the definition side, on the product side, we reduce the amount of work that we need to do so much that this wasn't a classical XP type project. We did everything like fully tested, so fully test driven. I think it took 4 months before we had all the basic functionality of the old system in there, which had taken, like I said, 10 years to build up to. And at that point, we could start moving people over from the old system to the new one. Another example was the financial institution in an English financial, what is it, scale up, and it similar type of situation where it was getting harder and harder to release the application, because it would take longer than a sprint to test the results of a sprint. It would take 3 weeks to test. Starting this process, and first just looking at what tests were really needed, what tests were important, and moving more of the tests into well-defined lower level, high resolution tests, brought that back from like 3 weeks to a day. That was good, not complete. But when we got there, we could start improving some of the both the backend systems and the app, because we had those tests faster, and we could continue that process and move testing back into the sprint and do that on a per story basis, not removing all of the legacy everywhere, but removing enough of it that the drag on releasing is gone. Well, I can stop sharing, by the way. So those are a few of the examples, and I've done a lot of these sort of projects over the years. I've also done them completely wrong, so I've got the counter examples to deal with, like the ones that I mentioned with where we replaced the same system 5 times in 4 years. There I could see exactly what went wrong, because we did not know what the real functionality was and why it was there and what can be released, what can be removed. So that I try in the book, every other page I think is an example from practice. So I try to make it as real as possible. I don't use many names because clients don't really like it when you tell them about the mess that you found. That's just something that I can't do.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. So Tom's had to drop off, but he did ask a few questions around things he was kind of interested in. So you've touched on some of that. I guess the point. Well, I'm reading between the lines of some of Tom's questions, and I guess it links into a little bit of what I was thinking about what you were saying, because we've all kind of been in these scenarios. Is So it's not clear on, so you're trying to avoid having to recreate a legacy system while either improving a legacy system or application, or effectively being able to, leverage it or integrate with it or anything else in a sort of low risk kind of way was kind of the main thing I took. But ideally, you would, because I think it's not cost effective, or organizations don't tend to have the sort of investment to throw something away and rebuild it. We've seen it happens, and sometimes it's not the right thing to do. But you did a couple of times talk about effectively things getting completely rebuilt. So would your summary point be you should be trying to avoid that, or you should be trying to do that, but in an efficient, low risk kind of way? What would you leave people with as a summary takeaway?
Yeah. So I that depends on I suppose which type of systems you're most used to. But in industry, I see a lot of systems being thrown away and simply rebuilt. And I also see that failing a lot because we tend to have a lot of functionality that's not documented and not known in the old system. So a lot of these sort of projects get to like 80% and then run into so much trouble with the other 80% that they never, or it takes really long for them to get into production. So it's a really expensive thing to do. And what I try to do is I try to be selective. Even if you've got a big monolithic system, the functionality that's in there really isn't. So if you can isolate things functionally first, and test them functionally, then you have the safety to pull out whatever that part of the functionality is that you need to change more often, and maybe put it in a separate system. But if you and you can either do that by refactoring, that works very often very well, but it's not something that helps you like change technologies or change architecture completely, right? So, or you can do that by rebuilding that particular part and integrating it seamlessly. And there's different ways of doing that, and I intentionally don't go into that part of it in the book because that's more the technical side of things. Um, but I think that that's the best way to go about things. Find out, find out what the functionality is, why you have it. Um, Test that so that you know it really does what you think it does. And this can be, if you've not gone through that process a lot, then that can be a very weird thing to say still, right? But most of the time, we don't know what our systems are doing. Some of them are really simple, but those are not the interesting ones. The legacy systems that have lasted are still there because they actually have complex functionality in them, and it's grown over time. So the original design documentation doesn't help you anymore. Often the test cases are sketchy at best, and they don't really tell you why you're doing anything there. Um, and they're often missing cases that were built later in the lifetime of the system. So finding out what the system does can be a really difficult task. And if you want to do that again as a big project, it usually fails because there's just too many cases, and you still need to have all the people with expertise in the system that you still have to focus on that. It's not that's usually a very painful process. So find out what you actually need to change, and very often that is a very core subset of the functionality, and pull that out first. And if then after you've done that, you want to change the technology, or you want to make sure um, you put a new you want to put a new front end on top of it, all of that is going to be so much easier to do.
You didn't mention regression much. So my own sort of experience of what you're describing, one of the things that I think we tend to fear a lot of the time is, like you say, you've got to understand the behavior, right? And you got to know how it works, how it's functioning, how it's going to behave in various scenarios. Then when you do make a change, you tend to have to invest a lot of time and effort in regression testing because you might have done something you didn't intend to do, right? So there are unintended consequences which could have, fairly significant, business implications or, negative impact on your customers. Do you want to, can you talk a little bit about your experience of that? Then I'll open it up to the rest of the group.
Yeah, well, like I said, if you've got right behind. Thanks, Susie. Yeah, my books are on the stack behind me. No, so the regression testing is, and I try to describe. Sometimes it's very structured, right? Very often it is. Um, hmm, there is a lot more decision making going on while running the test than that you think there might be if you look at it from the outside, right? So if the testers know what is being changed, they know where to aim their testing. If they work closer with the development team, they know what the side effects might be from their testing. But tends to be the case is that if you do manual regression testing, it is both very time consuming and almost always under severe pressure to do quickly. Which means that the way that humans work, there's always things being skipped. And so that's why in these sort of situations, when you've got these old systems and there's lots of manual testing, they very often they both are slow in testing and they still find a lot of problems in production. So I'm not necessarily very careful about changing regression testing because it tends to not achieve the purpose it's there for anyway. So I'm very comfortable with, for instance, like as I said, reducing the amount of regression tests as long as I can get the testers to interact more with the development team so that they can be more targeted about the testing that they do. And I'm even happier when I can make sure that a lot of the repetitive work that is being done by people doing the manual testing is replaced by those low-level tests that can usually be written by the developers and catch a lot, be a lot safer in catching issues. That doesn't mean you don't have to have any testers, but it means that you can use them a little more intelligently, and because of that, you can be faster.
Great, thanks for that. Any other questions, folks? We've still got a little bit of time. Happy to bring things to a close. Oh, there's something just popped in there. Edwin, thank you. Not sure who the question would be.
I think you're reading mine. Yeah.
Yeah, please. Yeah, feel free.
Yeah. So what? Well, thanks, Wouter, for the presentation. While listening to your presentation, I had some thoughts in my head, and I'm working at one of my assignments is at the number one supermarket in the Netherlands, where it's hard to believe how many people you can need for just a shopping app.
I think I've spent some time there, but it was a long time ago.
It's I think 300 people working on that doing your groceries app.
Yeah, see, it was only one team when I was there.
That must be long ago. Yes. Because nowadays, and it's not only there. I've seen it also in other places. So then it grows and it grows, and you have multiple teams, and they have most of them are feature teams, but they have parts of the total application product, and you also have those, I don't know, those IT for IT platform team people. They help you in migrating to the cloud. They help you in microservices, and then we find out that microservices is not the best idea, so we move slowly back to monolithic. And we've just migrated to GraphQL, and now people start talking about server-driven UI. So all those constant changes is to me is also some kind of legacy, where you for months you don't know that you're building up legacy, and then suddenly you have to migrate. So apparently you suddenly became a kind of a legacy system. And then I'm thinking of that Dutch tax application, where maybe those kind of new things, they don't happen there anymore. So it keeps on working. What's your opinion? Well, let me come to the question. What's your opinion about that?
I'm a little of two minds in that, because as long as an application needs frequent change, I think it's good to also keep up with the, let's say, I don't want to say fashion, but with developments in technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because those do usually happen for a reason. Now, you can't jump on every new thing, because that doesn't make any sense, right? But but there are ways where you can structure your application in such a way that at least the parts that change frequently can be changed as frequently as we need them to change.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that there is, like you said, for instance, we are going to do something new with the way we deliver our front end or fragments of our front end to the application, because that actually gives us possibilities that we otherwise wouldn't have. And for a company like that, where they want to iterate a lot on how they sell, that can be a major benefit, right? Yeah. So I can see that technological change has a good product reason. And if we've got the design of our system on you say, for instance, you have GraphQL backends right now, or backends for frontends, or whatever you want to you have, then putting a layer in between to see whether this is a good way to deal with our the generation of our frontends would be quite a natural thing to do. And you can evolve that into a next step by maybe merging that layer with whatever is in the back there that used to be GraphQL exposed, or not. But those sort of like gradual migrations over time can only happen if you've got your testing and really, really well in place for the core functionality, because otherwise you're just gonna be in a world of hurt in terms of all the issues that you're going to run into. But that those do depend on your architecture in the back being fairly loose coupled, having your domain logic isolated in the back end, not bleeding too much of that in the front end, so that you can have the right type of. And in those situations, I think it's a good thing if we move with the times, because that movement has a business value. For the tech services, they're probably still on a mainframe, and it's been working for a while, and right, and the changes were not that fast coming, but at some point, the quality of their system and the way it's decoupled is catching up with them and making sure that making sure, preventing them from doing the type of changes that they need to do.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't think that that's strange. Again, good intentions, but I do think that they might not have gotten there if they had done consistent movements with the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would say make sure that you can handle the new functional requirements and can deliver them in the pace that you want to deliver them, as you said. But same goes for, let's say, technology-driven improvements. Make sure
Yeah.
that you can also absorb them
And I
keep
really do
delivering.
think that those technology improvements have a specific product value, right?
Yeah,
Whether,
exactly. Yeah.
whether it's in savings on how you in savings in your cloud costs, or whether it's in moving quicker in doing certain changes and experiments on the front end, or
Yeah.
but there's reasons why you do them. It's not
Yeah.
just because it's a new technology, unless you see that the shift in technology is such that you need to move along with it.
Yeah, they also have a business benefit, or a business
Yeah.
case. Yeah. Thanks.
So, thank you both. Interesting conversation. So I think, Patrick, you've got on here, Junior talk. Okay.
I'll Stop the World. I don't know that song, but I will definitely look it up. Thanks.
We're getting to the end of our time box. Happy to take one other question if there is one from the group. Feel free to unmute and engage or ask any follow-up questions from Wouter while we have him here. Anything else from anybody else? Anything unclear? Anything you'd like Wouter to expand on? Definitely encourage you to pick up his book. I've got a copy of the Kindle. Needs read. Coming weeks.
Oh, yeah. So you no longer. As I said, you now have the summary. No, I want to just again, Seth and Donald, and Paula, thank you for having me. And oh, there we go. That's the song. Now, of course, I can't click this because it will start playing. But
don't do that. Save it for later.
I will. I just
Excellent. No, so I'll start wrapping up then. Fantastic. Thank you for that. It's great to have you here, Wouter. Very interesting session. As I say, you've definitely reminded me that I need to go back and delve into your book. I think there's a lot of really important topics there for all of us. I think we've all been touched by, what you've covered today, the core themes. I think most of us are impacted by, legacy in one way or another, and there's a lot of technical debt that builds up. Things become legacy quite quickly, right? So I think it's just
really quickly.
That's just the reality of the technology landscape that we're in. I think it's how you deal with that de-risk and make sure that you're able to continue to innovate. So thank you for sharing your insights. I greatly appreciated, and thanks to everyone else for joining and engaging and sharing your thoughts as well, and helping make it a thought-provoking conversation. I look forward to seeing you in Belgium next week. Very much looking forward to that. So thank you again. Just to wrap up, got a few sessions in the diary. We've got our final session next month of the 2024 program, which will be where we'll be welcoming back a previous guest speaker, Peter Rushin. He spoke here over 5 years ago now, so that's incredible. He works closely with David Marquis on the apprenticeship around in the intent-based leadership space, so that's where he is. So that's a very interesting session if you're interested in various facets of modern leadership. So we'd encourage you to sign up for that. So places available for that. So that'll be the hits and myths of intent-based leadership. So that's our finale for 2024. We've already got our opening session for 2025 in the calendar. So looking forward to welcoming Alison Coward, who did a keynote. I think it was at Lean Agile Cambridge this year. Suzanne's nodding. I think she recognised the name. So Alison will be joining us for the first session of 2025 in January. So space is still available for that one too. And she'll be talking about workshop culture, which is a phrase she'd coined. So great opportunity to, you know, get some great insights from her on building teams through, you know, great facilitation and how you can help them thrive. So 2 great sessions in there, and we'll continue to build up the program for 2025. We've also got a session we'd like to promote for a friend of our community. We helped host a session with just find my link, just bear with me. Sam has done sessions with us before. He'd done a lot of stuff in the Management 3.0 space. I've shared the link to his upcoming online session. It's early next week, so there's spaces available for that. So take a look at that if that's of interest to you. We promised we'd promote it for him. I think Donald, are you going to that? Yeah, so Donald's joining that session. So yeah, that's another good one. So if that's of interest to you, you know, yeah, spot, and we do have a discount for this community available. So you'll find that on Meetup. Can you share that, Donald? It's okay to share the code for everyone. If anybody wants to join Amir for that, then please do sign up. It is online, so you join it from the comfort of your home. You like to do these things from, but no, just thought we'd share that for him. And thanks again to you all, as I say, for joining us today, and we hope we'll see you at our finale of 2024. So yeah, enjoy the remainder of your day, wherever you have to be. I'm not sure. Good morning, or your afternoon, or your evening, and we'll catch you again soon. So thanks for joining. Stay safe, everyone. All the best. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks again. Bye.